Okay, so chapter 10, we're talking about cleaning and sanitizing. So we'll start off with the definitions. The definition of cleaning is to remove dirt and food from a surface. Sanitizing is reducing pathogens on a surface to safe levels. It's important to realize we're not getting rid of all of the pathogens, but we're reducing them. The cleaners that we use in a kitchen, they have to be stable. That means if you drop a bottle on the floor, it won't explode. They have to be non-corrosive, so they won't eat away at your equipment. They have to be safe to use. There are different types of cleaners that we have. Detergents, those are soaps for washing tables, washing dishes. Degreasers do exactly what they say. They cut the grease. Delimers remove the hard water buildup. There are minerals in water that you will see in different places, usually around dishwashers, coffee makers, and a delimer is an acid that is going to neutralize that and clean it up. And then finally, we have abrasive cleaners like cleansers and SOS pads that are used to get cooked on materials. So whenever we're using any type of a cleaner, we have to read the directions that are on the label. Only use them for their intended purpose. Do not use one type of cleaner in place of another unless the intended use is the same. If we're washing dishes and we're using a 3-bay sink, you cannot use dishwasher detergent in that sink. It could have chemicals in it that would burn people's hands. When it comes to sanitizing, we have a few different methods. One of them is by heat sanitizing. You'll have to memorize this temperature. If we have a 3-bay sink, we saw it, or we're going to see in this chapter, you need to immerse the item in water that is at least 171 degrees for at least 30 seconds, and that will sanitize it. You can also use a high temperature dishwasher. More common though is chemical sanitizing, where you soak items in a sanitizing solution, or the standalone items you rinse, swab, or spray, as shown in the picture here with a sanitizing solution. The chemical sanitizers most commonly used are chlorine or bleach, iodine, and quats, which is short for quaternary ammonium compounds. In this building, our mechanical dishwashers use chlorine, and then we use quats for our pot sink and to sanitize tabletops. We also have dual acting cleaners, a detergent sanitizer blend. You can use that the first time to clean and then use it the second time to sanitize the surface. When we're using chemical sanitizers, we have to be concerned about how much concentration we're using. We can't use just straight bleach out of a bottle because that would be too strong and it would corrode things. If we don't have enough sanitizer mixed with water, it can make the solution weak and useless. And too much sanitizer can make this solution too strong. And if people are ingesting that sanitizer, it could make them sick. It can also corrode metals. So we have concentration test kits. We take a closer look at this. This is a chlorine test strip, and it goes in shades from light gray all the way to black. And the color that you're looking for is going to be right in the center between this color and the darker black. So you want to make sure that you're only using this kit to test chlorine, make sure that you have a testing kit near each sink, each dishwasher that uses a chemical sanitizer, and check concentration often. Change your sanitizing solution whenever it becomes dirty or the concentration becomes too low. At the minimum, you have to change it every 4 hours. Temperature is going to depend on the manufacturer's recommendations for the correct water temperature. In this photograph, you can see the water has a kind of orangish color to it. That's indicative of using iodine as a sanitizer. And that has to do with the pH of the water and the mineral content. And you would use this in an area that has low mineral content, or what is typically referred to as soft water. And when I worked in Mississippi at Beau Rivage, we had very soft water and used iodine. Depending on the sanitizer, there's a certain amount of time that the pots and pans have to come in contact with the sanitizer. It differs for each one, and we're going to go through those. Okay, you mentioned water's hardness and pH. Your local water authority can help you with that. Work with your supplier. So whoever supplies your dishwasher usually will supply the chemicals for it, and they'll determine the correct amount of sanitizers that you need for your water. So guidelines for using specific sanitizers. First, we'll take a look at chlorine or bleach. There are 2 columns that we're looking at. This water pH of less than or equal to 10, that's indicative of hard water or water with more minerals in it. So the water temperature has to be at least 100 degrees. You want your concentration to be 50 to 99 parts per million, and contact time at least 7 seconds. If the pH of the water is a little bit lower, less than or equal to 8, your water has to be at least 75 degrees. And same concentration, same contact time of 7 seconds. The last 2 sanitizers we have are iodine, water temperature of 68, indicated here very low pH, less than 5, 12.5 to 25 parts per million. They have a separate testing strip. The sanitizer contact time is at least 30 seconds. And then finally, the Quats water temperature is a little bit higher at 75 degrees. And you have to follow your manufacturer's recommendation as far as what type of water you're using with. And again, it has to come in contact at least 30 seconds. So there are 5 steps in cleaning and sanitizing. First is to scrape or remove food bits from the surface. Then we're going to come by with soapy water and wash the surface. Next, we're going to rinse the surface. We're going to sanitize the surface. And then finally, we are going to allow the surface to air dry. Food contact surfaces must be cleaned and sanitized after they are used, before you work with a different type of food, after handling different types of raw TCS fruits and vegetables. Anytime that you're working and you get interrupted and the items may have been contaminated. After 4 hours if the items are in constant use. When it comes to cleaning and sanitizing stationary equipment, we've got a photograph of a slicer. First thing you want to do when it comes to cleaning any type of electric equipment is to unplug it. Once you do that, you can take off the removable parts and either run them through a sink or through a dishwasher. Then you go back to the standalone unit, scrape or remove food from the equipment surfaces, and then you're going to wash, rinse, and sanitize, and let it air dry. When you sanitize, make sure the sanitizer comes in contact with each surface of the machine. Again, finally, the last step is letting it air dry. Put the pieces back together again. And then if it's something that doesn't get used often, you probably would cover it up to prevent it from getting contaminated. For equipment that holds and dispenses TCS food, something like a soft serve ice cream machine, that has to be cleaned and sanitized every day unless otherwise indicated by the manufacturer. So you've got to read all your instructions in your booklet for that. It's the same kind of thing as standalone equipment. You're going to have to empty all the contents out of the machine, and then take it apart, wash all of the things that can go through a dishwasher, and then wash, rinse, and sanitize the actual machine and the contents of the machine. Heat sanitizing, if you're using a high temperature dishwasher, okay, so this is a mechanical device, the final sanitizing rinse must be at least 180 degrees. If you remember back to the 3-bay sink, that temperature was 171 degrees. If you have, and this 180 degrees is for a dishwasher that has a conveyor belt. If you have a stationary rack, similar to a home dishwasher, the temperature only has to be 165 degrees. They also make chemical sanitizing machines. They clean and sanitize at much lower temperatures, and the manufacturer guidelines will tell you what temperature you need to use for that. When you're operating a dishwasher, excuse me, you want to clean the machine as often as necessary. Talking about filters in those machines, they need to be cleaned every day at least. Scrape or rinse off the items before you run them through the dishwasher. Use the correct dish racks. This is actually a rack for plates. You can tell by the way that the plates are angled in the dish rack. They have separate racks for tableware, forks and knives, and spoons, and other racks for glasses for every type of glass, whether it's a wine glass, a champagne flute, a rocks glass, a water glass, an iced tea glass. Each one of those has its own type of rack. Never overload the dish racks. Make sure that all items are air dried. Also, when operating a dishwasher, you want to be able to check the machine's water temperature, water pressure, and sanitizer levels. Take corrective action if necessary. So if this is a high maximum registering thermometer and it comes out of the machine at less than 180 degrees, you know that you need to get that temperature up. So you can easily use this type of thermometer or a temperature sensitive tape on your device. When it comes to a 3-compartment sink, first step you do is clean and sanitize. So the picture doesn't show it very well, but there's a drain board on the left-hand side and also on the right-hand side. So we're going to clean all of that before we even start to do dishes. We'll fill the sinks. The first sink gets your detergent and water that is at least 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot enough that it will feel hot to you when you put your hands in it. Second sink is clean water for rinsing. Third sink is water and sanitizer. And it's also necessary that you have a clock that has a second hand on it. And that way you can measure how long the items come in contact with the sanitizer. Okay, so steps for cleaning and sanitizing using a 3-compartment sink, very similar to the dishwasher. We have a station on the left-hand side of the sink. It might be on the right hand in different kitchens. But that's your first storage area. You can scrape and rinse them off. Oftentimes there's a garbage disposal there. So before they go into the pot sink, you get most of the food items off of it. Second step, washing the items in the sink that you have the detergent. Third step is rinse the items in the second sink. Fourth step, sanitizing the items in the third sink. And then finally, the last step is air dry the items on a clean and sanitized surface. Notice that they're being placed upside down so the water drains out of them. Okay, so we have a 3-compartment sink set up in here, going from left to right. Rinse, scrape or soak, wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry. We're being asked to identify some things that are wrong with this 3-compartment sink. I'm just going to skip ahead to the next slide that tells us. We have, first of all, we're missing a clock with a second hand. The second rinse sink and the sanitizer sink both have soapy water on them. We've got nice hot water in the first sink, which is correct. And then finally, where we have to air dry the pots and pans, they are turned right side up and they need to be turned upside down so that the water drains out. Once we've had the equipment cleaned and sanitized, tableware is stored at least 6 inches off of the floor. If they're stored in drawers, they have to be cleaned and sanitized before items are stored there. Store glasses and cups upside down on a clean and sanitized shelf or rack. Store your flatware and your utensils with the handles up. That way, when somebody goes to grab them, they're only touching the handles instead of the part that goes into somebody's mouth or touches food. Clean and sanitize all of the trays or carts that you use to carry clean tableware and utensils. Treat it just as if it were food going onto those trays and carts. Cover the food contact surfaces of stationary equipment until ready for use. So like we looked at the slicer earlier, if that's something we don't use every day, you would want to have that covered up. Our wiping cloths, we use these to wipe up food spills and wipe down equipment in the kitchen. We have a wet wiping cloth and a dry wiping cloth. Ever use cloths that are meant for wiping food spills for any other purpose? So wet wiping cloths, we use those for wiping counters and other surfaces. It's stored in the sanitizer solution in between uses. So we would never want to see this paint cloth just sitting on the table. Change the solution when necessary, at least every 4 hours or when it becomes dirty, or if the concentration becomes too low. You want to make sure that what you're using a sanitizer bucket for raw meat, fish, and poultry is separate from other sanitizing cloths. We also have dry wiping cloths that we use to wipe food spills from tableware or from plates. So when you're plating up, if you get some sauce on the rim of the plate, you would use a dry towel to wipe that up. You want to make sure that that towel stays dry while you're using it and that it doesn't collect food debris or become visibly dirty. When we are cleaning non-food contact surfaces in the premises, those include the walls, ceilings, floors, equipment, exteriors, anything else that doesn't come in contact with food normally. You want to make sure that those are cleaned on a regular basis. a lot of times when something is spilled, it will splash up on the walls, and it's not always the first place that somebody looks when they need to clean up. So you want to do that on a regular basis so that doesn't build up on your wall. You could have pathogens growing there. It could attract pests. It's not a good situation. Cleaning and sanitizing in the operation when people get sick. So if somebody has vomiting in the kitchen or diarrhea, both of those items can carry norovirus, which we've learned is very contagious. You want the correct cleanup that prevents the contamination of food and spreading illness to others. So you want to have specific procedures for cleaning up vomit and diarrhea, and everybody has to know exactly what they are supposed to do. So we have, in our kitchens, we have a universal spill kit. It contains nitrile gloves. It contains a powder to solidify liquids. It has eye protection, foot protection, and the gloves, as I mentioned, and then an accident report to record the information about the incident. Okay, when it comes to storing the cleaning tools and chemicals, we want to do this away from food and food prep areas. So our storage area for cleaning should have good lighting so the chemicals can easily be seen. Hooks for hanging your cleaning tools. You don't want your mops or brooms to be touching the floor. They want to be hanging up from the floor so that rodents don't decide to make a home under your cleaning tools. You need a utility sink, typically in a janitor's closet, for filling your buckets and washing your cleaning tools. You need floor drains for dumping dirty water. That's what's shown here. Our kitchens have floor drains built along the line as well. Some things that you don't want to do. Your tools that you use for cleaning, you don't want to clean those in a sink that is used for any of these hand washing, food preparation, or dishwashing. That's what your janitor's closet is for. You also do not want to dump mop water or other liquid waste into toilets or urinals. You could splash contaminants onto the bucket if you do something like that. You're using food service chemicals. Only use those approved for food service operations. Your supplier, your equipment manufacturer will have recommendations for you. Never keep chemicals that are not used in the operation. So sometimes a salesperson will come by and offer you a trial sample of something, and it's not something that you're normally using. It's not a chemical that you normally use. You don't want to let that hang around in your operation. Cover or remove items that could become contaminated before using chemicals. After using chemicals, clean and sanitize equipment and utensils that may have been exposed to it. Follow your local laws and manufacturer's directions. We also want to make sure that we store chemicals in their original containers. Those containers will have the directions for use. Keep those things separate from food, from your food equipment, your utensils, your linens, your single-use items, by spacing them physically away from those items, or partitioning the chemicals so that they won't come in contact with your food items. Always be sure that you're storing chemicals below food, equipment, utensils, and linens, so they don't spill onto any of those things. The manufacturer's label must include directions for use and be clear enough to read. If the chemicals are transferred to a new working container, the working container has to be labeled with the common name. As shown in the picture here, if you need to use sanitizer in a spray bottle, your bottle has to say sanitizer on it. You also want to have a cleaning program, something in writing. A master cleaning schedule is a good idea. Train everybody on the staff how to follow it. Then the manager has to monitor that program and make sure that it's working. We have to identify what should be cleaned, who should clean it, when it should be cleaned, and how it should be cleaned. So what type of tools are going to be used, what type of detergent or cleaner is going to be used. All of that should be in writing on your cleaning schedule. You want to supervise the daily cleaning routines. There should be a sheet with areas for people to initial that they've done the cleaning, and then somebody needs to go follow up and check that the cleaning is sufficient. Change the master schedule as needed. You might get in new equipment, or you might have a new menu item that will affect the way that you have to clean your kitchen. It's very important to ask the staff for input on the program. You'll usually have some employees that are more than willing to let you know that whatever your cleaning routine is not sufficient. And that's a good thing, because you want to make sure that everything does get clean. Alrighty, that's the end of chapter 10.